All right. Well, good morning, everybody in the UK. Good afternoon, evening, everyone in China, and hello, everyone in between. Hope you're doing very well today. Delighted to welcome you to our webinar on CBBC's recently released China's Middle Income Consumers Report. So this is a really key demographic. In fact, could be argued one of the most important demographics in the world if you're trying to sell anything over the next few years. So this report has been very meaningful and very important for CBBC. And we hope to share some insight with you today. So our presenters will be Jeff and TJ. Jeff is based between Shanghai and Beijing these days. He's one of our executive directors there. And TJ is based in Shanghai. I'm Dave, and I'm here in London. So before we get going, just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know who CBBC is. The China Britain Business Council is the leading organisation helping UK companies grow and develop their business with China. CBBC supports companies of all sizes and at every stage of market entry with practical in-market assistance, services, industry initiatives, as well as a membership programme offering access, seminars and significant networking. CBBC works closely with UKTI and the FCO and has a strategic partnership with the British Chamber of Commerce in Beijing, providing corporate members with reciprocal membership. And I believe that membership has also extended to the British Chamber of Commerce in southwest China, in Chengdu and Chongqing. Our business-led board and professional team have extensive first-hand experience of doing business in China, and through 60 years of engagement, CBBC has built up exceptional contacts with government and business across China. CBBC services are delivered through a network of 10 offices in the UK and 13 strategic locations across China. CBBC helps companies to network and learn from China-savvy multinationals and SMEs to understand the intricacies of doing business in China and to develop sound strategies for expanding in the fast-changing and dynamic marketplace that is modern China. So that's just a little bit of a background from our perspective. All right, so today is quite an interactive platform, so I would welcome you to ask questions as you see fit. So all of you should have this little control panel. I'm just highlighting a couple of areas of how it works. If you want to remove it from your screen, you can just click on the area that I'm highlighting here. If you want to ask questions at any time, just please type them in there. If they're relevant to the flow of the speech, I will drop it straight in and I will ask Jeff and TJ immediately. Otherwise, I will save it to the end. If I could ask you all at this point, please, to click on the area that I'm highlighting now, which is the Raise Your Hand button. If I could ask you to click on the Raise Your Hand button, that will just allow me to know that you can all hear me. So if you could click on that, that would be fabulous. Just that area that I'm highlighting now, Raise Your Hand. Great, I can see plenty of people are clicking, so I'm going to put all your hands down. Like good school children, you can all put your hands down now. Okay. We will also have a lot of interactive polls as we go along. So I'm just going to give an example of the poll. The first poll I'm going to ask everybody, quite a simple one. Where are you? So these polls will just, some of them will be questions about China, and some of them will also just help our colleagues to understand the different demographic of people that are here today. So nearly everybody is voting now. So just take that second, please, to click on wherever you are and click confirm at the bottom. We'll just give it another second or two. I'm going to close that and then I'm going to share the results. So it's just interesting for us to see where everybody is. 10% are in China, 55% UK outside London, 31% UK London and 3% other. That's good news for us. One of the reasons that we hold this webinar platform is to allow people who mightn't necessarily be able to travel for an event to still get the content and information that they need to help their business in China. So that's really, really good to see that a lot of people outside of London in the UK are logged on today. All right, terrific. Move on a little bit just to introduce our speakers. We have two speakers today. Jeff Assel is an Executive Director for Business Services. He's a marketing and finance background and over 20 years industry experience, 14 in Asia and 7 years in China. His background is principally media and broadcasting, and he's managed hundreds of research projects for UK companies in multiple sectors. So Jeff had been looking after up until recently, our OMIS and research in China. Also supporting Jeff today is TJ, Tianjie He, known to us affectionately as TJ, who is a research analyst, a background in economics and finance, and 3 years of research experience, educational background in the EU and in Hong Kong. She's a certified financial risk manager and previously worked with Dow Jones Consulting. Okay, I think that's pretty much it from me. I think everybody's logged on who's going to join us today. I'm going to do that great moment. Jeff, are you out there? Can we hear you?
Hi, I can hear you fine.
Super. All right. Well, I'm just going to hand over to you. Thanks for that, and we'll get underway.
Thanks, David. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Just to give you a bit of background, we, through the work that CBBC do in China, working with all British companies, bringing them hopefully to success in the Chinese market. Over the last few years, I've been working with many, and a lot of questions have been asked of me around this particular issue, around the growing middle-income consumer, and I think it's got a lot of press in the UK too. And also increasingly, I think we're seeing a lot more Chinese firms recognizing this and raising their interest in working with British firms who can help them accelerate through a marketplace, maybe in terms of developing their competence or bringing brands to market to satisfy the growing need of these Chinese middle-income consumers. So that in mind, we decided to undertake a study to answer certain questions, but also to provide a kind of a quick and easy to read review of what's going on in this marketplace. One of the key questions is, can China really change its current economy, which is still very much export-led and investment infrastructure, big investment projects in railways and airports and roads, can it change that economy over the next 10 years to transform into a very modern consumer-led economy? And we'll touch on a few points around that. Secondly, we wanted to highlight some of the trends and put some facts and figures around these growing trends in China, some startling numbers I'm sure you will see around what's going on in terms of the migration of population from rural areas and rural lifestyles into urban areas, and how that's changing the demographics and profile of the average big city in China, and also how that is also presenting lots of challenges for companies entering China and also Chinese government in terms of handling these changes and transitions that China is going through. We also then wanted to get into a bit more detail about profiling, understanding the buying behaviour and attitudes and lifestyles of these consumers, and we looked at a whole host of industry sectors to drill into a bit more detail. And finally, we wanted to use this obviously to help those British companies coming to China, to help them perhaps through the minefield of understanding who and how to target consumers, and maybe where some of the hotspots are and the hot opportunities are. We work with many of our different CBBC members and partners, such as McKinsey and Mintel and KPMG, PwC and so on. We did interviews with certain of our CBBC members, including Burberry, Savills, the property company, and Nottingham University. Next slide, David.
Jeff, I think we have a poll to go. So I think the first poll that I'm going to launch here is how many people already live in urban areas in China. So if we just, this is a bit of a guess for us all if you don't know the background. So I've launched that now. If you could please click on how many people already live in urban areas in China. What percentage, or sorry, 500 million, 600 million, 700 million, or 800 million. So people are just voting at the minute. We'll give it another couple of seconds there. I think most people, I think, are pretty much on the money here. So I'm going to close that, and I'll just share the information with everybody. So it says 10% 500 million, 29% have said 600 million, 45% have said 700 million, and 16% have said 800 million. Over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, the answer to that is 725 million, but changing as we speak, changing every day. I mean, the numbers, this is the biggest migration of people to cities in history, and the numbers are startling. So we're currently looking at around 725 million people living in cities. Wow, that's a big number, but actually put it in context, we're talking about 160 cities in China, over 1 million people. And you think about the size of Europe and the number of cities we have over 1 million. In the UK, it's what, 3? 13 across Europe. And so I think, and this number will increase too. And there are plans, I think I've seen forecasts that this number will grow to 220 plus cities over the next 20 years or so. So the number is growing. The number of urban dwellers continues to grow, and that translates into 260 million urban households. Again, to put that into context, over the last 10 years, there's been 100 million new urban households created. So this is what's really been pushing the infrastructure development projects, the property development projects over the last 10 years, and that number is not expected to tail off. The forecasts are still for the same number of new urban households to be created over the next 10 years too. The lifestyle of these urban populations is changing for many reasons. One, I think the other thing that's the startling growth rates are in terms of the income levels that these Chinese consumers, Chinese population, urban population are now seeing. They're moving towards more reasonable figures. So only 13 years ago, the average Chinese urban population employee would be earning around £900 a year. Now that's around 5,000, 5,100 a year. So this number has been growing very quickly. That, therefore, is converting into people with increasing spending power. Now, the cost of living in those cities is growing up as well, creating a challenge in some of the major first-tier cities like Beijing and Shanghai and Guangzhou and Shenzhen. But also it's providing opportunities so that these consumers have increasing spending power and are spending more on consumables, on cars, on fashion and luxury goods. In fact, the overall Chinese household spending has multiplied 3 times in the last 10 years. Next slide, David. So there's some really positive things there. But also I think this whole transition towards urban lifestyles and moving from rural populations into urban populations and the changing demographics is also creating a lot of challenges for China to address. Overall, one or two points to make is that with the one-child policy that has existed in China for many years now, most family structures are such that there is a husband and a wife and one child, and they're likely to be supporting, each of them, a mother and a father, or a grandfather and a grandmother on both sides, often traditionally living in one household. So you may have households of 6 or 7 people with one child and maybe only one earning person in that family having to support the whole family. We're also seeing, therefore, a sort of growing elderly population, and overall all of this is putting strains on the overall working population available in China. There's a shrinking workforce. The number of actual employees available is decreasing. We've seen urban structures, because they're moving into cities, there's a strain on the size of the properties that they're living in compared to the rural properties, and that's having to change family structures. So you see a lot of families where grandmother and grandma may be looking after the child back in their own town, and then the parents are working in the city but may only see their children once or twice a year. So these are putting lots of strains on traditional family structures, as well as the increasing aging population, property prices increasing, and sort of general issues around pollution, environment, food safety, healthcare, and so on. David?
A quote of the day so far from you, Jeff, is bread-earning person, which I thought was great. I assume you mean breadwinner on that. No, I have a quick question. I have a quick question from John here. John asks, how would the recent China figures released count as a major challenge?
In terms of the declining GDP?
Yeah, I think it's the macro figures that came out last week. The GDP figures. Do you think they would factor as a major challenge here?
I think it's increasingly putting emphasis on the importance of China to look towards moving towards a services-led, domestic consumption-led economy. I think the challenges are that just relying on investment and investing in infrastructure is a short to medium term solution for driving future economic growth. I think the way that it's been positioned by Li Keqiang and others is that this is the new normal, and the economy is settling down at reasonable levels of economic growth, but that still relies on continuing increase in consumption-led growth rather than relying on infrastructure and investment and export-led growth.
Okay, so your message there, just briefly, would be that there's still a lot to do in China, not to take it negatively. You know, there's been a lot of negative press about it, but just that the opportunities are still there. It's just a slightly different playing field. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and it's going to be harder. You know, the boom times are over. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And I think that really puts this slide, next slide, puts it into context where a bit complicated to understand, but on the left side we're looking at the percentage of total GDP driven by household consumption as opposed to exports or government infrastructure investment. And comparing it with their overall GDP per capita, which, as I said before, the average income of an employee is around about £5,000. So the per capita income in China currently sits at equivalent levels to some of its neighbors like Thailand or Malaysia. But as the country becomes wealthier, which is definitely going to continue because that growth is, although it's a lower percentage, is still very high relative to other countries around the world. Will China convert itself into a sort of fast-moving consumer economy, such as some of the other countries in this region that we've seen develop, like Japan, South Korea, and sisters like Taiwan and Hong Kong? And if so, how are they going to stimulate that consumer economy? Or will it remain a sort of more planned government-led economy, such as like Singapore? So we envisage it to be somewhere in the middle, but I think that's the challenge as China transitions from a developing economy into a developed economy. Will it be, how much of its growth will convert to being consumer-led? Now, all the signs are healthy when we get into the detail of the middle-income consumer, but there's other issues around lifestyle, behavior changes, spending patterns, saving patterns, and I'll leave TJ to go into a bit more detail about some of these things. Next slide, David.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to talk about the middle-income consumers in China. So they're on average earn between 6,000 and 23,000 pounds a year, and this is about 2 to 8 times the national average household disposable income per capita. One of the most striking characteristics of the Chinese middle income is their youth. More than half of them are under the age of 45. And this is largely reflected in their consumer behavior and their lifestyle, which we will discuss later. And there's an emerging trend that the growth of the middle income consumers are shifting from the first-tier megacities to medium and smaller-sized lower-tier cities, also from East Coast regions to more of the west and inland areas.
And I think, sorry TJ to jump in, but I think that's a real interesting trend that's going on. Whereas those companies looking to come to China, say 5, 10 years ago, would think Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, those 4 megacities with populations of more than 10 million, is where it's at to hit the kind of luxury spenders or the emerging, fast-moving middle-income consumers. That is going to be increasingly less the case as they move to second-tier cities, maybe 1 hour or 2 hours outside of those cities, or further west inland to emerging provinces. Sorry, TJ.
Yeah. Okay. Then regarding the savings rates, on average, Chinese middle incomes now save around 30% of their income, and it typically increases when consumers earn more. The major reasons for savings are for children's education, parents' elderly care, property purchases, as well as for financial investments. Next slide, please. So in terms of consumer shopping attitudes, Mintel segmented China's middle incomes into 4 different types. Let's starting from the right-hand side of the pie chart, progressive affluent spenders. These consumers' purchasing decisions are more led by brand image, which can reflect a high social status and to make them feel happy. They tend to buy internationally well-known brands. For trendy aspirers, they're willing to pay premium to keep up with the latest gadgets such as Apple or Samsung products, latest fashion as well as well-known brands, because they believe these products or brands can enhance their unique self-image. So they tend to follow their own taste regardless of current trend. And for value-led buyers, they're more practical in their purchase because they're considering paying more for a combination of the quality, brand name, as well as well-known brands, and they pay more attention to quality rather than price.
I think one of the things here is that they're becoming increasingly complex and diverse in their spending behavior. So just looking at them as one block of people is misleading. One of the things that, we work in an office where I could just highlight some people, a guy in his early 30s looking to get married soon, doesn't have a property yet, earning reasonable income, but saving 70% of his salary. So he's a conservative spender because he really wants to get on the property ladder. Somebody else may be a little younger and is really ambitious, really wants to be fashionable, really wants to stand out, will spend an awful lot on brand goods and holidays or something to really stand out. And then there's those that want to be sort of moving up that income chart very, very quickly, looking to consume, to really live a lifestyle. So I think it's increasingly diverse as we see in Europe and the UK. You can't really segment them by income alone. You've got to really look into their behaviours and their attitudes.
Yeah, Jeff is right. Because they're also more located outside of the first-tier cities, and there's also a growing number of the young urbanites, particularly because they're young, so they're coming up with very different shopping attitudes. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I think we have a poll here again. Actually, a quick question. I'm going to launch another one. Let me just find it. It is middle-income consumers. I'm going to launch that for everybody. Middle-income consumers in China will account for what share of consumption by 2022? So please just have a click on that. Is it 50%, 60%, 70%, or 80%? So middle-income consumers in China will account for what share of consumption by 2022? So this is probably a harder one. I get the feeling that people have done their homework here. I get that maybe that people have read the report, which is a good sign.
I mean, when we've said before, David, about people moving towards China moving towards a consumer-led economy, it's the importance of this subsector that's going to be so critical in China's move towards this consumer-led economy.
Sure. Okay. Well, let me share the results here. We have 5% say 50, 38% say 60, 38% say 70, and 19% say 80. So I think the correct, so to speak, answer is 70% as far as I know. Back across to you, Jeff.
Yeah, it is 70%. So it's a little bit tricky, though. I think it should be around 70%, even a little bit higher. But as Jeff mentioned before, that the urban household consumption will triple in the next 10 years. So by 2022, it will reach 2.7 trillion pounds. So 70% is roughly about 1.9 trillion pounds by 2022.
Staggering numbers,
yeah. So
before we move on, TJ, sorry, before we move on a little, I've got a question here from James, if that's okay. He asks, and I think it's one of those questions that people regularly ask about China. So what is the effect of parents and grandparents providing funds for their child or grandchild? So I think that dynamic, if you could introduce that whole, maybe 421 and all of those issues, perhaps you could talk a little bit about that.
It's really, really interesting. I mean, I think this is a very, very interesting topic. You've got there's a few things I'd like to highlight. Often, parents, we'll talk about it a little later on, some things like education and healthcare, they will save all of that and spend all of their savings on their children, so education, and they will save large proportions of their salary for their future, for their children's future marriage and property purchase, to get them established and set up in the future. However, then that comes with a reciprocal expectation that as they get older, they will be taken care of. Typically, Chinese elderly people expect to retire, in inverted commas, younger than we would in the West, around sort of 60 years old, and will take over a lot of the burden of child rearing of the working 30-somethings parents. So you will find households where the grandmother has left her family home and is living in the back room of a lovely modern 2-bedroom apartment, taking care of a 4 or 5-year-old baby, taken to the school every day, and feeding them and shopping for them while the younger generation is still out working. So it's a critical and important dynamic in Chinese society. And I guess as we look to move forward, how much of that will be put under strain as the population becomes increasingly mobile, increasingly individualistic, and will those kind of values still hold in a modern consumer-led economy? I think it has its merits, big merits, in terms of supporting the middle income 30 to 40-year-olds in getting on the property ladder, helping to support their children through their early years, and so on. But it comes with a cost later on in life.
All right, thanks for that.
Just a little bit. I think this is also one of the negative consequences of the one-child policy in China, because parents only got one child, so they tend to invest everything they have in this one child, and expect that in the future they will pay them back someday. So I think in the future it probably will change a little bit because people got more influenced by Western culture, especially young generations. But so far, I think within the maybe even past centuries, we'll still continue by this tradition.
Put that in context, there is now a liberalization of the one-child policy. If one of the parents is an only child, they can have more than one child. So you are seeing a slow increase in the average number of children per family. But the number is still startlingly low. I believe it's about 1.35 children per family across China, and that includes rural and urban households. And that will take a time, maybe a generation, before we start to see that dramatic shift.
So it sounds like there's a webinar in that topic alone, or a couple of theses anyway. Anyway, thanks for that. Let you move on.
Okay. So if you ask me, what are today's middle-income consumers looking for? I think there are 4 key things that can largely reflect the new trends of their changing consumer behavior. So firstly, they're looking for quality. This can be seen from the increasing consumption of imported products as well as luxury goods. The new generation of the Chinese middle incomes, those who were born in the 1980s and early 1990s, also described as one-child generation in China. They differ from their parents who lived through many years of a shortage economy. The younger generation, they were born and raised up in relative material abundance. So they're also generally well educated. So they tend to care more about quality rather than the price, and they're willing to pay extra for good value or quality. And secondly, they're also looking for convenience. This has been evidenced in the rapid expansion of the China's e-commerce market. China's middle-income consumers, they are particularly fast-moving and fast-adapting. Nowadays, many of them have already been used to online shopping, not only on their computer, but also on their mobile devices. And social media platform has risen to be the top information channel for product search and recommendations. And thirdly, about leisure, this can be seen from increasing consumption of services among middle-income consumers. It's reflected in the willingness that they want to pay for leisure and entertainment activities, in contrast with the older generation who mostly worked for the sake of the financial security.
And are happy to entertain themselves at home.
Yeah. So those younger generations in China, they're learning to appreciate life and to increasingly focusing on a wider variety of the leisure activities. Especially in some large urban cities, it can be a way of escaping the increasingly heavy workloads. And last but not least, individuality or uniqueness. are starting to speak to many of the Chinese middle-income consumers. So they now tend to stay away from the big brands, turning to more exclusive brands which can better distinguish their personalities. And this shift in attitudes actually happened in a remarkably short period of time, which marking the increasing sophistication of the middle-income consumers in China.
I think that's a really important point. I don't think you're going to cover it later, TJ.
Yeah,
but whereas everyone wanted to look like everybody else 5, 10 years ago, and it's sort of Me Too kind of attitude, there's a real change now to, wanting to stand out.
Yeah. So in brief, that the Chinese middle-income consumers are becoming more discerning, less brand-led, less brand loyal. They're going to be more open-minded, and they're willing to try out new things. But meanwhile, it is not only about the Westernness. It is more of a modern, unique Chinese lifestyle, which we were talking about. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's quickly go through some facts and figures from a number of different perspectives, which may help you to know more about the consumer habits in China. So 85% of the middle income, they shop online and they spend around £100 per month. This is roughly about 15% of their salary. 2/3 of them bought imported products, mainly food and drinks, cosmetics, apparel, shoes, or electronics. And foreign brands account for 25% of the total online purchases. 60% of them were found to use social media platform. Although consumption as share of GDP remains low in China, as Jeff discussed before, household consumption in China is actually booming to some extent. This is largely because I think it's thanks to Alibaba, that China's e-commerce retail giant. So the company recorded huge sales boost on its annual online shopping festival during the past few years. So on the last Chinese Singles Day, 11th of November, the company reported £5.7 billion in its sales. It is an increase about 60% from 2013. And this is 30% bigger than the entire US online sales from Thanksgiving and Black Friday through to Cyber Monday.
Yeah, and TJ, sorry, I want to jump in there and make a quick point on that 11/11. About 42, Alibaba themselves reckon about 40 to 45% of that 5.7 billion came from a mobile device, and I think that's that's a step that's a point that's really, really key and maybe a little bit different even to how e-commerce is done in this part of the world. Sorry, back across, TJ.
Yes, on this just 1 month later, on the Double 12 online shopping festival, this is also evidence that the mobile payment platform. So on that day, the company, Alibaba, recruited some 20,000 offline merchants, offering large-scale discounts on a wide range of goods and services, which proved especially popular as the Chinese consumers, including many of those senior consumers, they packed out supermarkets, stores, and other retail outlets. They're using their smartphones to buy discounted goods, and then they pick them up directly from the store. So about 45% of the total purchases were made via the mobile payment app, Alipay Wallet.
I think we can't underestimate we can't overestimate this. It's such a big difference, I think, in terms of behaviors in China, that they're so much more willing to shop online on a mobile device. Yeah. They're so much more willing to search for things and find new things online, and they will use social media as a means to talk about things, to share advice and new trends and fashions, to get advice on where to purchase. Again, a lot of this on their mobile phone rather than sort of searches on the internet. And also, I think for foreign brands coming into the market, 67% of this group have bought imported products online. And 25% of all their purchases are for foreign brands. It shows that this market this online shopping channel is a way for them to try out new things that they might not be able to find in their local shopping mall.
Yeah. So then we talk about luxury shopping. Currently, China accounts for 30% of the global luxury market, and China's middle-income consumers already driven 70% of domestic luxury sales growth. There are three main trends that we detected from the middle-income luxury shoppers in China. Firstly, they're becoming less brand-led and more pragmatic. So around 70% of them can be considered as rational luxury consumers who occasionally buy luxury goods, and they're mostly product quality and design driven. Secondly, Chinese luxury shoppers typically younger. 45% of them are under the age of 35, in comparison to 28% in Western Europe. And the pro is longer life cycles, and the con is a lack of brand loyalty. So younger consumers, they like to shift brands in response to social cues or a changing in his or her own preferences, tastes, or even status. So it should be noted that in China, the appeals to brand heritage or tradition that tend to work well in the West may fail in Chinese market. And thirdly, there is also an increasing number of aspiring luxury shoppers in lower-tier cities, such as Shenyang, Xi'an, or Chengdu. These consumers, they have lower living expenses, so they have better chance to occasionally splurge on luxury goods. I think you need to be aware that for many of those lower-tier cities, these markets are very supply-driven, which means that new store openings create new demands, and as a result, will lead to higher costs for companies. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I've got a quick question here from E. She or he asks, could you, sorry, let me find it here. Could you cover or talk a little bit about something called Daigo for luxury goods? Does that make sense to you?
The overseas sales agent, right? It's very popular in China nowadays, especially because Chinese consumers have a very strong appeal to Western brands. So they ask those people they located overseas to help them to buy products from overseas markets and they ship them to China. It is a booming market, I believe. I don't know the exact figure, but as far as I observed around myself, I mean, on the social media platform WeChat, every day everybody is posting their pictures. I mean, those people located overseas, they're posting product pictures and then advertising, saying like, I have this is on discount, that is on discount. Then everybody goes to them to buy it.
So just to make this clear, this is people that live in the UK that have a kind of WeChat site that are selling their service to buy things in the UK and bring it back on behalf of
just ship them back to the Chinese market.
Now, whether that's
well, there's a risk.
bypassing some import laws, I think is the question. I think also, I think the other thing is that the online shopping platforms now and some of the sort of direct imported goods routes that we can bring into China, and also the logistics services are such that consumers can buy themselves directly. I guess these guys are middlemen, agents for certain types of luxury products because they can catch all the discount that's available in the UK.
Yeah, because the main problem is still that the consumer tax is still too high in China. The import tax is still too high, so people tend to buy overseas. Even they ship it from overseas to China, it's still cheaper compared to the retail price in China.
Okay, thank you for that. I've moved on for you.
Okay. So now let's look at the lifestyle. If you want to capture the Chinese middle income consumers, you also need to know what is changing on their lifestyle. So last year, Mintel conducted a survey on consumers' aspirations, and they found that the top 2 personal goals for Chinese consumers is to have a healthier diet and to exercise more. However, in the UK, consumers aimed at spending more time with their family and getting their finances in order. In fact, the Chinese consumers nowadays, they're paying more attention than ever to their health and fitness. And they're now willing to pay for gym memberships and may even employ personal trainers. In addition, they're also more likely than Western consumers to pick fruits, nuts, and yogurts as their snacks because they believe these goods will do benefit to their health. And as I mentioned before, there's also growing interest in leisure activities. So the younger generation are spending a higher proportion of their income on dining out, various outdoor activities, as well as some short distance day trips. We're seeing that the Chinese middle income, they're nowadays pursuing a healthy and balanced lifestyle. It is closer to Western lifestyle, but it's not just Westernized. So they're merging the habits of working out, drinking wine, and having stakes into their own new lifestyles. Likewise, they're increasingly not buying the international brands such as Starbucks or Apple to be associated with the West, but because it has become a part of the modern Chinese middle-income lifestyle.
I think food and leisure sectors are very interesting, are very hot sectors and provide lots of opportunities. And also, as TJ says, making them localized is very, very important, not just trying to export your food or leisure brand into China. If you go into a Starbucks, it doesn't look like a Starbucks in the UK. Many things are similar, but you look at the menu, and the menu will be very much localized, with green tea latte being one of the top sellers in Chinese Starbucks.
Yeah, it's true. So the glamour to be associated with is just not enough to guarantee your sales in Chinese market. And next slide, please, David.
Yeah, I think we're moving on. So we have another poll question actually, because I think we're moving on to tourism at this point. So let's just launch that. It's how many people visited the UK how many Chinese people visited the UK in 2013? Jeff, do you like the green tea latte yourself? The way you described it, the way you said it there, didn't sound like you loved it.
Yeah, I have tried it. I'm partial to a little bit of a green tea latte occasionally. Okay. But I prefer my real green tea. I'm so Chinese these days.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll just close that. Our results, pretty much everyone has voted. Our results are, I'll share them with everybody. 21% say 100,000, 21% say 200,000, 39% say 300,000, and 18% say 400,000. Back across to you, Jeff.
I think there was a little bit typo to choice B.
Yeah.
But the right answer is B.
Okay, so the right answer is about 200,000.
Yeah, it is actually an increase of almost 200% from like 10 years ago. Yeah, so let's get into more details. So figures of the China outbound tourism, as you can see, is quite amazing, which is also largely driven by the middle-income consumers. From 2010 to 2014, China's overseas visits grew by more than 800%. I think roughly 850, 100%. And overseas, and in 2013, 200,000 Chinese visit UK and spent in total 500 million pounds. And spending is expected to double to 1 billion by 2017. And nearly 2/3 of the Chinese middle income have traveled overseas in the past 3 years, averaging 1 trip per year. We found that nowadays middle-income consumers, they're becoming more independent travelers, and they're choosing destinations for many other reasons, not just for shopping. And they're increasingly looking for more exclusive or local brands that cannot be readily purchased in China.
I think there's a couple of points here, David, I'd like to pick up on. One is this boom in overseas travel. I mean, that's just, tenfold increase in 4 or 5 years. UK is one of the leading destinations around in Europe for this European travel. London is a hotspot for travel. We've got this market opportunity to double in the next 3 or 4 years the value. And the final point, they're starting to go off the beaten track. It's not just to London to go shopping on Oxford Street or Regent Street, or to buy an expensive luxury brand. They're starting to want to explore. As many of those visitors are there for a second time, or they're getting references, or they're choosing their own through WeChat. They're getting feedback from people who've already been. They're looking to explore other cities and looking to have more experiential holidays rather than just be part of a tour group and go shopping.
Next slide, please, David.
Sure. Just one thing I'd like to jump in and say, if any of the listeners today, if you haven't seen the Visit Britain campaign that's going on at the moment, please do go online. You'll see it on the front of our CBBC.org. It's a fantastic campaign asking Chinese people to give Chinese names to UK landmarks that actually don't have a Chinese name. So, and it's a way of encouraging awareness and just going, getting things onto social media and being viral about it. So I would recommend having a look at that. It's really quite good fun.
Okay, here also comes an interesting thing. So in China, if a man wants to get married, he is expected at the very least to have a house, a car, and some fairly sizable wages. It may sound like an exaggeration, but it is so entrenched that the idea of marrying without a house, a car, and all the accoutrements now even has its own term, a naked wedding. So it's 裸婚 in Chinese, yeah. So we found that over 70% of middle incomes already own private property in China, and with average mortgage payments accounting for 1/3 of their income. There are also diverse perceptions about property prices and buying property in China, as majority of the first-tier dwellers see owning a property as a very big financial burden. However, much fewer have the same view in lower-tier cities. And
I think I'd just like to raise the point there, back to what the question was asked earlier about the importance of family. You know, family are helping those children onto the property ladder because it's seen as TJ said, entrenched in the values of marriage and sort of being an adult in society. And also, I think the other point is about the diversity of the property market from first-tier big cities like Shanghai, where it's a burden and increasingly a worry, and people are planning for it and spending a large proportion of their income, to third-tier, second-tier cities and regional cities where it's seen as an opportunity to get on the property market before the boom really hits their city. So there's increasingly diverse perceptions about property.
Yeah, and in terms of car ownership, China is now the world's largest car market with 18 million car sales every year and 250 million cars already on the road. Also around 70% of the middle incomes already own a car. However, in first-tier cities, it's down to 40%. In the past, that car ownership was often perceived as a status symbol, but nowadays it's increasingly considered a practical lifestyle. Also, there are I think more than half of the car owners in China, they're under the age of 35. And female car purchasing intentions have increased dramatically during the past few years. Car ownership and car demand is higher in lower-tier cities, perhaps because of the inconvenience of public transport. Nevertheless, in total, that China still only has 70 cars per 1,000 people, compared to 500 cars per 1,000 in the UK. So we believe there is still huge growth potential in the Chinese market. Yes, next slide, please. I will pass it to Jeff.
Okay, just to wrap up, we've got a few other sectors I wanted to cover off, which I think are of interest and important. One is the importance of education to Chinese society, Chinese consumers. Currently, there's around 400,000 Chinese overseas students. By 2017, it will be the world's largest, overtaking, so therefore predominantly overtaking, I think, the US. I'm not so sure actually which city, which country it is. And increasingly, I think the most important thing here is that these are not your wealthy individuals taking their kids overseas to study. It's middle-income consumers, middle-income families who are investing a large proportion of their life savings in their future, in the future of their children, so that when they return to China, they will get better jobs and be able to support them in their older age. So they're seeing it as a long-term investment in their children in sending them overseas. I think the UK has a very strong global leading position in this sector, the second most popular destination worldwide for overseas education, and this is growing dramatically, up 80% in the last 5 years. And there's now over 100,000, I understand from a recent report I saw from the British Council, now over 100,000 UK-based Chinese students. Next slide, David, please. And finally, I just wanted to talk about healthcare. Health issues generally is a big topic in China, and this presents lots and lots of opportunities and challenges. One of the government's aims is to develop a very, very sophisticated and widespread private hospital system to support the more public hospital network. And they're looking to get to a stage like at the end of this year that 20% of patients will be receiving private hospital care as well as the public care. I think when we did the survey, we got kind of diverse views from feedback from the middle-income consumers, and this is what we generally see in this sector, is that they recognise the benefits of private healthcare, and they're very worried and concerned about healthcare, but there's still wariness about the costs. However, they do see some of the benefits, particularly as TJ picked up before, about convenience, about efficiency and high quality, and sort of individual demands rather than perhaps just standard demands that they'll get from public hospitals. I think specifically around areas of elderly care. Again, we talked about the growing number of elderly population in China, with this one-child policy feeding up to looking after elderly people, so that's a big issue. Children, also a big issue, and maybe a separate aside around sort of cosmetic and sort of minor surgeries that they would be prepared to pay for private healthcare. Next slide, David. So to wrap up some of the key points I wanted to make about this middle-income consumers is that they are less geographically centered around the East Coast major first-tier cities of Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, and increasingly becoming more widespread into the western and northern areas, and increasingly in second and third-tier cities. As we saw with some of their profiles, they are not just one big mass of middle-income consumers. Their behaviours, their lifestyles and their attitudes are becoming more and more diverse and more sophisticated in the types of, and mature in the types of purchase decisions they're making. More pragmatic, more discerning, and more sophisticated in general. Less focused on just aspiring to Western brands and more looking for individual, unique Chinese characteristics when they're purchasing Western brands, rather than just copying me too. They're looking for something that fits with their lifestyle and their attitudes. Some general themes around quality, safety, convenience, and sort of entertainment, leisure-centered and individualistic and sort of uniqueness will be some general takeaway themes. Final slide, David. So what does this mean if you're bringing products to China? If you can't compete on price, don't compete on price is one message I often say to consumers. They are willing to pay a premium, but they're not going to be blindly willing to pay. They're more discerning and looking for quality, looking for safety, things that fit with their values around well-being, things that make them stand out and are in tune with their individualistic attitudes and values. Do not assume that because the branding and the packaging and the positioning works in the UK, that it will sell on its Westernness or its Britishness in China. You need to really do your research and understand where your positioning in the market is, what the values that you're trying to align with, and what it is that the needs that these consumers have, and localizing packaging, localizing communication, localizing product development, and also consider other channels that you might not consider to get to those consumers using social media and things like that. So don't think your traditional business model will be easily translated into success in China. That's the end, David.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a couple of minutes for questions if people want to drop them in there. A few people throughout the presentation have asked about visas. Now, I'm happy to pick up that question. So this is certainly quite a sensitive issue in terms of visas. Something that the China-Britain Business Council does is work very closely with the Home Office. We have regular briefings and regular updates. So if visas is an issue to your work, please do contact us directly and you can become a part of that. I would draw your attention to the Select Business Scheme UK, which is for CBBC members to expedite the document preparation that has to happen when getting business visas for Chinese citizens to the UK. So that will certainly speed up that entire process for you. but please do get involved. I mean, I think from CBBC's perspective, we appreciate the complexity of the visa issue. We also recognize that it is clearly hindering business, and we have a strong but gentle opinion to give to the Home Office each 6 months when we have a direct meeting with them. So please do contact us if that is a serious issue for you. One other question. There's quite a few about education that have popped up. One, you talked a little bit about middle-income consumers moving abroad for international education. Are middle-income consumers increasingly spending more money in China on supplementary education, I guess extracurriculars and extra tutoring and all of that kind of question? That question is
Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And I think that's an interesting trend that, obviously there's been a huge growth in English education over the last 10, 15 years. But I think it's becoming increasingly sophisticated. So it's not just about English education, it's about skills, it's about professional qualifications, it's about further personal development. Distance and online learning is growing dramatically. And I think what we're also seeing is a growing number of British universities and British private schools have now established and well-established physical presence here in China. One of our members, Nottingham University, that we survey, have a big campus in a city called Ningbo, which is about 2 hours outside of Shanghai. And a number of our members, university members of CBBC, have both physical and virtual presences out here in China and provide everything from sort of MBA type courses through to preparatory university courses. So I think it's not just about sending their children overseas, it's about education in general. They're willing to invest in it.
Okay, thanks for that. Quick question from Keith, which I think is quite an interesting one. It's to do with packaging. So he says, we've been told that Chinese consumer can actually appreciate foreign language on the packaging when it's an imported product from England, for instance. Maybe you want to comment on that. So in terms of packaging, should you make it look like it's an international product, or because you talked a lot about localizing product lines and your delicious latte, green tea latte, and all of that kind of stuff. So for packaging, what would you do there? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think there's a nice balance you need to find. Is that we've done some work recently in the food and drink sector where the Britishness of the product is valued, and we've seen that in sort of the luxury goods sector, clothing, accessories and things, very much so that the Britishness of that product is valued, and don't underestimate the value of that in getting the message across to a Chinese consumer that this is a foreign good and this is from a well-respected country like the UK. But then maybe in terms of the messaging and also the positioning and the way that perhaps the product is delivered to the consumer in terms of the product design, it's important to look at local aspects then. So the size of the product may be different because the consumer behavior is different. The way it's delivered to the consumer in terms of distribution channels may be different because the consumer behavior is different. But so it's finding that balance between communicating the Britishness of the product and really play on that as much as you can, but look at the local needs too. David?
Yes, okay, sorry, I thought that dead air, I thought you dropped off the edge of the world there, I was getting afraid. But you're still there, cool. Just one or two more because I want to keep us to within an hour. A question here from Marcus. He asks, are Chinese consumers using online platforms such as Indiegogo.com to purchase products online? I guess it goes to the bigger e-commerce thing, but perhaps you could talk about that.
Yes, I've not heard of Indiegogo.com, but they have a large number of big e-commerce platforms, companies that we can certainly provide you with further information on some of these. I think there's quite a lot of information available from CBBC. We have a guide to e-commerce in China as well. Brands like Yihaodian, which is a huge brand for YHD.com, huge brand for selling international food and drinks. There's Tmall, which is part of the Alibaba group, which is like an online virtual shopping mall with all major brands. And there are a whole host of other sector-specific competitor brands. It's increasingly competitive, very diverse, very mature, big brands in that kind of e-commerce, e-mall type space. Consumers don't Google things, or Baidu, which is the equivalent of Google. They won't just try and find something. They will use these brands, and they will use WeChat, which is the equivalent of sort of a Twitter and a kind of social media site to find out about brands and find out about things. They won't just kind of Google things. They will go through these kind of platforms like yhd.com or Tmall to purchase things.
Okay, thanks for that. I would draw you, anyone in the UK, I would draw your attention to two colleagues here. The first is Fenella Barber, who's one of our directors, who leads on all things retail and consumer. She is absolutely somebody to get in touch with for that. And secondly, Mark Headley, who leads is a China business advisor and also leads in the ICT area, and he's kind of the guy to go to for e-commerce. So those two people, and they hold regular business clinics here in London, either by telephone or you can come and see them in the office. They'd be happy to talk to you about the next steps that your company can make. They have done a number of events already, and I think they're doing clinics today, but we can set something up in the future for you. So that's Fenella Barber and Mark Headley here in the UK. All right, I think conscious a little bit that we've got to our hour, and I'd like to wrap it up there. I would say thanks very much to TJ and to Jeff. I think you're both in Beijing at the moment. If you have any further questions, please do contact CBBC about this, where, as I say, our experts are happy to support you. So thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best China business, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.